there, and welcome to another episode of And Action, ITV's movie review show, where we give our thoughts on a range of films from Hollywood's classics to the movies that have just hit theaters. Today, as you can probably tell by the picture behind me, we are talking about a recent movie, Black Widow. I am joined today by Ricky. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Fellow MCU fan, probably more so than I am. I would consider myself to be a very casual MCU fan, but I think you're a little bit more into it than I am.
Yeah.
So after what seems like forever, Black Widow is finally in theaters and on Disney Plus Premier Access. But this movie has just been keep getting delayed and pushed back. But July 2021, here we are. Black Widow is finally out. Well, actually, before we begin, we are going to be talking about spoilers, considering that this is a recent movie. This is your formal spoiler warning, so if you have not seen Black Widow yet, I advise you to click away and come back when you have. Almost forgot the spoiler warning. That would have been bad. But yes, spoiler warning, it is very obvious. So,
someone would have hulked out and smashed their computer.
Right, exactly. So I, for one, just my general broad thoughts, I really like this movie.
Well, that's a shock.
Yeah, I know because we haven't talked about it
Yes.
yet, and I was kind of picking up from our brief conversations that you did not feel the same way I did.
I do not feel the same way that you do.
Yeah.
I felt like you were giving me the vibe of, I have a lot of issues with it.
I do have some issues, but overall, I enjoyed the movie. I went and I saw it with a couple friends, and it was just a nice movie to sit down, eat some popcorn too, and just have a good time.
You see, I felt like it was a movie, it's the type of movie that you put on in the background while you're typing up emails or you're doing work, and it goes through one ear and out the other. There's a lot of stuff that happens. There's visually appealing stuff. I just felt like it was a letdown in the sense that it had no real identity to it. You know, this is a character that is completely different from all the other characters. She's not a superhero, but yet I know it's a superhero movie, but you know, she's treated like she's a superhero throughout the whole thing. She falls from a high building and hits everything on the way down and then lands on her feet like she's a cat. You know, I wouldn't even expect Captain America to do that, you know? There's no sense of, like, there's no danger to her, and I know it's technically a prequel in every, you know, in every sense of the word. It just doesn't press the character in any meaningful way. It doesn't challenge her. It doesn't challenge her philosophical views on anything and who she is. And it's weird because we have followed this character for 10 years, and this is, I guess, technically spoiler. She's dead in this universe at this point. So technically this would be Scarlett Johansson's, I guess, swan song in a lot of ways, unless they figure out a way to bring her back. This is her final go, you know. Yeah. I feel like she deserved better. And I feel like one of the core issues I have with the film is, outside, this should be, like, to me, this should have been more like a Mission Impossible movie, or even a James Bond movie. I wanted to see what made her special. And she's a spy. I wanted to see gadgets. I wanted to see really cool, well thought out, complicated set pieces that are related to being a spy. And for example, you have the, I guess you would call it an assault on the jail where they're trying to break out their father figure, Alexis? Alexi goes by, he's the Red Guardian.
Yeah.
And it was so underwhelming because they just fly a helicopter above it and they're just being fired upon, and then she drops down and beats up guys and they get out of there. You know, like, that's it. That's the best you can come up with. You can't go watch some classic spy movies and figure out a way to, like, hey, let's do this. Let's make it unique. Let's make it special. And instead we got a typical loud action scene, and I was really disappointed by that. Another thing I was disappointed by, and this isn't really, it's hard. I mean, I'm going to hold it against the movie because, but the underlying story to Black Widow is extremely, extremely dark.
It is.
And they touch upon it throughout the movie. But this is a Disney movie. They can't go all in on it. And that's a really disappointing thing with this particular character. I wish Disney would allow Marvel to do more adult-oriented fare, because I think this would have been a much better, lower-budget movie, because you hear about stuff like The Red Room, and you hear about just how absolutely disturbing like, they touch upon it. But you know that if you're watching it and it was actually more ingrained into the story, I think you would have had a more emotional story for the character. And I know a lot of people would say, well, this is just an action movie, it's just a superhero movie. But I think these superhero movies need to start kind of separating themselves and start, setting themselves apart, because in a lot of ways, this movie isn't really all that different from what Marvel's been doing for the past several years.
It felt like it fit very well with the older Marvel movies. And I mean, that makes sense because it was supposed to come out back then. I think that this movie should have came out right after Civil War, because that's the time period that it takes place in. And that would have given Natasha's death so much more meaning and substance in Endgame, instead of 2-3 years later after Endgame we finally now get the Black Widow movie. I feel like if we would have had this movie before then, it would have done great things for her character in Endgame. Also, the time period that the movie takes place kind of surprised me, because when I heard we were getting a Black Widow movie, I figured, it's going to be her origin story. Like, we're going to go way back and discover what she was like before she defected to S.H.I.E.L.D. But it really surprised me that it was taking place after Civil War but before Infinity War, because I figured, well, it's either going to take place well before we see her in Iron Man 2, or it's going to take place in those 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame. So the way that it was after Civil War kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, it felt like the movie they did everything they could to dance around really doing, I think, the most interesting things that you could do with the character. Because like you said, if you go back to her past, like her real past, that sounded more interesting. When they were discussing the process of the Red Room and what they actually do, and you don't really see it. You see kind of glimpses of it, but they don't really press it. That sounded more interesting. I kind of wanted to see something that's more in tone with, let me use the Netflix Marvel shows like Daredevil. Those were darker. I think that this is what Black Widow probably needed, was something darker and more serious. And they just danced around it. And it's interesting that you brought up Civil War. That's probably one of my more favorite Marvel movies, because I feel like it takes what makes those characters interesting and it challenges them. You finally see the Avengers collide with each other. These are a bunch of alpha personalities. They, how in the first Avengers movies, they somehow, they get along to the degree they need to, but when they clash, it's always just really superficial. It's always meant for a joke. Yeah. This is the first time that I felt like they really clashed. And Captain America in particular, his views are challenged in that movie, and it works so well. His views on government, the way that people should live, how they should live, and how they should be a part of the world is challenged. And Tony Stark in that movie challenges against it. None of that is in this movie. And I'm going to talk about some of the spoilers here. We might as well say it, right? Taskmaster is a woman that Black Widow, or Natasha, thinks she killed early in life. That she thinks she killed this person as a child. Well, you see the flashback early on, which means this character's making a comeback. That's just movie 101. You see that character, she thinks she's dead. You see the flashback, that character's coming back. Well, she comes back as the Taskmaster. Taskmaster shows up, throughout, sparingly throughout the movie, whenever it's convenient for there to be a cool fight scene. And she's a cool character. She is a cool character. But you never really get to sink your teeth into the character, or even the Red Room, the guy that runs the Red Room, because they save all of it for the end. And if you watch the end where she's confronting him, all that emotional stuff that should have been spread out throughout the movie, it's all jam-packed there in 10 minutes, and it just doesn't, the payoff just isn't the same.
My problem with Taskmaster, is that Taskmaster never feels like a threat during the movie. It's supposed to be this character that can replicate your fighting style and knows what move you're going to make before you make it. And we see Taskmaster with the shield, with the claws like Black Panther, and the arrow like Hawkeye. So this should be a very threatening character. But it just never felt like that throughout the movie.
I agree, and she had a really great opening fight scene with Natasha. Yes. I thought it was a really great way to introduce the character. I would like to have seen a little bit more visual cues that this character is using other fight styles, and then it ends with, obviously, Natasha getting knocked off a bridge practicing for Endgame, because she does that a lot in this movie. She does a lot of falling off stuff in this movie. But I completely agree with you. It's a completely underutilized character, and I'm hoping that this isn't one of those situations where they're like, well, we got Disney Plus, so we can make a show about them, when they should have put everything into the character into this movie, because it didn't benefit Natasha by the end of it. A couple things, another issue I had with is, why is it, and this is part of just living in a shared universe, this guy's got a base floating in the clouds, and it's supposed to be hidden. You're going to tell me that you have this base in the cloud, and Tony Stark doesn't know it exists? Come on, this is ridiculous. I did like, though, that they did mention throughout it that the event, they didn't go after her because she's an Avenger, and if they go after her, they're going to end up with a Hulk and the Thor on the doorstep, which I thought was actually a pretty cool. A cool nod that made a lot of sense. I would just like to, again, I know they can't go that far with it because it's Disney, but I wish they could have gone further with this idea. There's so much to explore, to a degree that I kind of hope that they do consider doing like maybe a Hulu series about a younger Black Widow, about Natasha getting into that world, where they can maybe explore that a little bit more on Hulu. But I will say the one positive that I think comes out of this really well, and I think personally, I don't know if you agree with me, I think Florence Pugh, who plays Yelena, she is a superstar.
Stole the show.
She's amazing.
Stole every scene that she was in. She was by far my favorite part of this movie. So many funny moments, and just the way her character was. And you see her, she's cracking jokes and being funny in one scene, but then she's giving out an incredible performance, being very emotional in another scene. Absolutely loved her character in this movie. She
handled the whole thing. Like, she was the emotional linchpin, and it was almost to the point, like you said, she handles the comedy, she handles the sarcasm, and then right into the next scene, she's dealing with the emotional fallout of, in a way that, again, it was almost a disservice to Scarlett Johansson's character, to where she just kind of walked through the movie in a lot of ways. There's a great scene, and again, I feel like we should have had more scenes like this, where they're at the family, well, I wouldn't say it's great. There's some really good stuff in it, where they're at the house, and the family's at the dinner table, and they're talking about how this life was fake to them.
Yeah.
It wasn't real, but it was to her. She was the one that was emotionally hurt, because as a child, that was her family. Even though it was taken from her, she believed it was real.
Yeah.
And she does such a great job at really selling that moment in that character. And to be honest with you, I feel like this movie was more about her than it was about Natasha.
I don't like the fact that I agree with you, but I do. Yelena literally stole every scene that she was in, and I was, every time she was on screen, I was curious to see what her character had to say, and I loved. She had so many great moments in this movie when she's talking to Nat about doing the pose with the arm thing, and then later in the movie she does it, and then she's just disgusted by it. And then I love the vest with the pockets that hold a bunch of stuff, and then she gives that to Natasha at the end of the movie, and that's the vest we see her wearing in Infinity War. I just thought that was really cool.
She sold those moments, like the posing thing. That would probably be grating with any other actor or actress. That would be kind of you rolling your eyes or the pocket thing. She managed to sell it really well with a lot of great humor without it being like too overboard, because some of that stuff would feel forced otherwise, but she's such a good actress. She really is. And I don't know if that was like the play, because a lot of times when you have a character like that in that role in these kinds of movies, they're kind of a pushover. You know what I mean? Just in terms of just how they can be handled. And she handles herself in a very similar way that Natasha does. So it's not like she's a pushover. She's on par. She's able to take the same punishment that she can, and she gets right back up. And I think that personally, since it looks like she's going to be the new Black Widow going forward, I feel like that she was the best part of the movie. So, I mean, I guess maybe it did what it was supposed to do in propping her up.
We'll get back to that talk about her in the end credit scene in a little bit, but I want to talk about another character that we mentioned earlier, the Red Guardian, David Harbour's character. What were your thoughts on him?
I thought he was all right. I wasn't really, I know there's a lot of people that are into him. I don't dislike him. I don't hate him. I wouldn't be sad if I never saw him again. I know he kind of talked a bit about like, hey, I battled Captain America. I thought he worked well for what he was needed for. Yeah.
I agree with you. He definitely was not the most interesting character ever, but I liked him. I think his parts of the movie were good. Did not enjoy his character as much as I did Yelena, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost like everyone, and again, I include Natasha in this, that they were almost all overshadowed by Yelena because she was just so good. I mean, they have that great moment where they're in the bedroom with, or he's in the bedroom with Yelena, and he starts singing American, what is it then? It's not American Pie, but
It's yeah, I think it is.
Don McLean song, yeah.
American Pie.
He starts singing it because that's her favorite song as a kid, and it's a really great moment. It's probably one of the better emotionally charged moments in the film, and it works really well, and she sells it really well, and he does a really good job with it, I think. But I think in terms of like, do I really want to see more of the character? I'm not dying to. I don't. I know there's a lot of people that are like, well, how did he battle Captain America? I don't really care that much.
I love the scene when they're breaking out of the prison and he's in the helicopter and they're talking about if they'll have enough fuel to make it, and he's like, we have enough, and then the next shot is literally just the helicopter coming down into a field. I thought that was really funny. But I think that covers the character talk. I mean, we had Melina as well. The mother figure.
She's kind of just there, and she shows up at the end. My guess is Marvel has other plans for them in the future, so I'm sure they'll kind of pop back up again.
Right. Going back, I want to talk about the opening credit sequence because I remember
which I hated.
I remember I asked you about that, and I was like, I've seen a lot of good talk about that online, and then you said you hated it. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
I feel like it didn't add anything to the overall story. I feel like you tack on these scenes that, Wonder Woman 84 did it too, where you had this big, the Amazon games at the beginning of Wonder Woman 84, and it was like just 10, 15 minutes of void. A lot of that stuff that they had could have been included throughout the film in other more impactful ways that would have been more beneficial to Scarlett Johansson. It was just really cheesy because you get baby Scarlett Johansson coming out, and they get on their backs or whatever, and they start walking on their hands like spiders, like a little on the nose. And I know they're trying to drop in some of the motifs like the American Pie song, and then the whistling that just randomly comes back later. I get why they do that. They do a lot of the foreshadowing is a little bit too eye rolling for me. But I've learned over the years that flashback, when your movie begins with a flashback, it's going to be like a 10, 15 minute long thing. It usually doesn't bring anything to the table of value that you couldn't include anywhere else in the story. Your movie it doesn't get off. Like, the movie to me doesn't start until the moment where they're at, with Yelena. Is it after the credits, I think?
I believe so.
That's when the movie really begins. To me, they should have taken that scene, expanded upon it, and had that be the intro, and then you do your credits, and then you go into Natasha. That would have been the stronger intro to me.
Yeah, I definitely, I didn't mind it, the opening scene. I thought it was fine. I didn't really have any strong feelings one way or another. I did really enjoy the opening credit sequence when the Nirvana cover song was
that was pretty much, that was like a peak moment of the movie, was the interesting Nirvana cover.
I thought just the way those shots were filmed, and you almost got these Cold War vibes just by the way it looked.
It was setting up for a very different movie than you actually get.
Yeah, because that was dark. That stuff was dark.
That was dark.
That was probably the darkest thing in the movie, just showing kind of the origins of the Red Room and what they were all about. And
it's weird because when we say it, there could be people that say, well, that's not what Disney's about. The unfortunate part is that is Black Widow's story. It is a very dark story, and they try really hard to dance around it in this. And I don't think they successfully do it in the way that I'd like.
Right. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. I do want to talk about the end credits scene.
Okay.
Definitely caught me off guard when I saw what was that woman's name? Val?
Val, I can't remember her
She
full name.
was the one in Falcon the Winter Soldier who was with John Walker. My jaw dropped when I saw that.
Now, in fairness, this was supposed to be released before that, and we were supposed to see her for the first time here versus in there. So it wasn't as much of a surprise to me. But and then
she shows Yelena a picture of Clint at Nat's grave post Endgame. And she's going to go, it seems like she's going to go after him. So I was wondering if this is setting up some Dark Avengers with John Walker and Yelena.
I do think they do Dark Avengers eventually. My guess is I think she ends up showing up in the Hawkeye show in some way. I don't think they're gonna sit on this for too long and let her kind of dwell on that situation. I think they're gonna try to go somewhere else with the character because I think she's gonna be a big role in the franchise going forward. That would be my guess. I don't think she's gonna be too tied to Hawkeye.
Okay, yes.
That would be my guess.
I'm excited to see where Yelena shows up next.
I am. I
because-
think when I came out of it, I'm more interested to see where that character is and where she's going. And if that was the goal of the movie, then awesome. But I don't know if necessarily that was the goal.
All right. So, as tradition on Ant Action, we're going to give the movie a score out of 10. For me, I'm going to give it, let's go with an 8 out of 10. It was a movie that I enjoyed. I had a very good time seeing. I would definitely rewatch it again. It was just, as not a huge MCU person, it was just a fun movie to sit through and to watch, and I really liked it.
All right, I give my score now. Okay,
Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna give it a 6.5. I think. I feel like again, it's skirted around too much good content. You know what I mean? When you write, you got to write with the good stuff. I feel like it tried too hard to get away from it. It was really underwhelming. It's not unwatchable. It's a completely watchable movie. But I feel like, and maybe this is kind of the final Marvel movie of its kind. We don't know. But it's time for them to start infusing new ideas and new concepts into it. And I think that this could have been that opportunity and used a lot more of a spy genre field to kind of separate it. And I don't think they ever did that. So
There were definitely some things I would change about the movie, mostly dealing with, the antagonists of the film and kind of making them seem more threatening, I guess. But other than that, it was a movie I enjoyed. I'm definitely going to watch it again.
I mean, I'll probably throw it on every now and then whenever I'm kind of just sitting at home, like I said, and I want to put something on in the background. If they do a Black Widow 2, I'm guessing it will star Yelena, and I really hope they go all in on just finding the ways that make her unique. Just go all in on those attributes and those traits and run with it.
Yep. All right, Ricky, thank you for joining me. You got any final thoughts on Black Widow?
No, I think I pretty much said
perfect.
what I needed to.
So that's going to do it for this week's episode of And Action. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.